I agree with the PCA on basically everything except their existence. Hey guys, welcome back to KingdomCraft, where I build this big church in Minecraft while I talk about Christianity, and today I'm going to be justifying something that seems really stupid to everyone. Why am I in a denomination that's so liberal when I'm clearly not liberal, and why won't I just join the more conservative version of it? And I'll explain exactly why in this video. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a Presbyterian, and there are a bunch of Presbyterian denominations in America, but there's two main ones. There's the PCUSA, Presbyterian Church USA, which is the more liberal one, and the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, which is the more conservative one. And I'm more conservative, so it makes sense that I would be in the PCA, right? No. There's a reason why I'm not, why I'm in the PCUSA instead of the PCA. So, really, it's because the PCUSA is the original one. It's what's called a mainline Protestant denomination because it's the, there used to just be the Presbyterian churches, there wasn't, mainline and evangelical denominations. That distinction came about when the mainline Protestant churches in all brands, Presbyterian, Methodist, Lutheran, Baptist, Episcopal, they all started to become more theologically liberal. And that's not quite the same as politically liberal, as I always say. Theologically liberal means they don't take the claims of Christianity as seriously, and they don't really care if people actually believe in it. It becomes more of just going through the motions, and the only thing they really care about is social justice. They sort of redefine the gospel as that. So when the mainline denominations became more theologically liberal, the evangelical denominations were basically a bunch of conservative outcasts who split off, who ran away, and who started their own things. So it's no exception for Presbyterians. The PCUSA, Presbyterian Church USA, is the original Presbyterian denomination, and the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, is a denomination that was formed by a bunch of conservatives who got frustrated with the PCUSA becoming more liberal and who split off. Really, what they split from was the PCUS, which was the southern brand that merged with the northern brand to become the PCUSA, but same idea. And as a result, in any given town, the PCUSA church is going to look something like this. Most PCUSA churches are beautiful, historic buildings, and most PCA churches, again, it's a generalization, there's exceptions, but generally speaking, most PCA churches don't really look like old historic church buildings. They're often like a rented-out gym, or if they do have their own building, it looks kind of like a modern Baptist or non-denominational church. The PCA is not known for having good buildings. I even saw, I live in New York, so I was wondering if there's a good PCA church in New York City. Not that I was planning to go, because I'm already part of the PCUSA church in my hometown. But I saw a PCA church that actually meets in a synagogue, so it's the PCUSA definitely wins in terms of buildings. But people will say, okay, maybe the PCUSA has nicer buildings. So what? Isn't doctrine more important than buildings? Well, yeah, of course doctrine is more important. But the buildings are just the most visible aspect of a much deeper problem. And it's that when the conservatives jumped ship, they left behind so much with them. It wasn't just buildings that they left behind. It was also all the historical rootedness and cultural connections of the PCUSA. And this applies to all the mainline denominations, not just the Presbyterians. For example, the United Methodist Church, the Episcopal Church, it applies to all the mainline denominations. Any given, hospital or university, a really mainstream established one that was started by Protestants, is always affiliated with the mainline church, not the evangelical churches. For the PCUSA, it's the hospital, for example, Columbia Presbyterian. It's a really big deal hospital, and oh wait, no, this is the tree that belongs to the bees. I'm going to keep this one. That it's a really big hospital, and of course it's not affiliated with the PCA, it's affiliated with the PCUSA, because it's almost always the mainliners that keep the institutions. And it's important for the cultural credibility of the church for it to be affiliated with cultural institutions. And the way the left hijacks culture is by hijacking the cultural institutions, and that starts with them hijacking the church. So you need a culturally rooted church in order to influence the culture. And that's why I say the PCA has good, very, very good doctrine compared to the PCUSA and compared to most other denominations, but it does not have the cultural rootedness of the PCUSA. It does not have the power to affect culture, because religion affects culture more than we realize. Like, every Ivy League school was started by Bible-believing Christians. Princeton is still affiliated with the PCUSA. Princeton Seminary, of course, is super woke and liberal, but that's only because the conservatives all jumped ship. So the PCUSA still owns all the hospitals, all the historic church buildings, all the universities, because they're the original established ones. And so yeah, it's way more than just buildings. It's deep-rooted cultural connections that are crucial for a church to have any sort of real impact on culture. Because, like, I don't see denominations like the PCA really having much of an impact on culture. And that's why I always say we need to retake denominations like the PCUSA. When I say I'm in the PCUSA, I'm not saying I'm happy with the way it is. I'm devastated by the way it is. I'm saying that's all the more reason why we need to retake it, because we can't let the institutions that Protestants built centuries ago just be hijacked at the whims of a few progressives just because the conservatives got too scared to fight for them. So yeah, it's way more than just buildings, like I said. And I know I talked about cultural issues mostly, and it's more so a cultural reason than a theological reason for why I want to stay in the PCUSA, why I want to stay in the historically rooted and established church. But there are some theological issues. Of course, if it's a theology contest, it's no question the PCA obviously beats the PCUSA, because in many PCUSA churches, it's not even clear if they're Christian in any sense. So yeah, obviously I'm not going to try and sit here and tell you guys that the PCUSA has better theology. But it's not like the PCA's theology is perfect. As a result of being disconnected from their historical roots due to sort of being like an offshoot schismatic branch, they do often forget certain, like, classical Reformed doctrines, especially, this is the big thing, especially when it comes to the sacraments. Because the PCA generally has a much lower view of the sacraments than, like, for example, John Calvin and John Knox did. I always talk about this. I talked about this in the last episode where I talked about the Federal Vision movement that sort of arose in response to this issue that was a problem in the PCA. But it's very common to hear a PCA pastor talk about the Lord's Supper like it's just a symbol. I've heard PCA pastors basically explicitly confess a Zwinglian view of the Lord's Supper, and they don't even really know that Calvin believed we received the true body and blood of Christ in the Lord's Supper, even though he absolutely did. Now, the PCUSA pastors, it's not like they have a perfect confession of a Reformed doctrine of the sacraments, but because they're more historically rooted, they at least know what the original Reformed doctrine was, even if they won't confess it, because a lot of them won't even confess Christianity in any sense. So like I said, I'm not saying the PCUSA's theology is better, but I'm saying there are consequences of the PCA not being that historically rooted. Because, like I said, if looking from the outside, if you see a church building that looks something like this in the center of town, you're going to think, okay, this is an institution that has some credibility culturally. If you see a church that's like meeting in a gym and it was founded 10 years ago, again, it's really not the same amount of cultural credibility. And that's why evangelical Christians as a whole basically never influence culture and always lose the culture wars. The only thing they can win is elections, because elections just depend on raw numbers. So that's why there's some evangelical Christian, like, politicians. But in terms of, like, the cultural institutions, evangelicals are nowhere to be seen. The only Christians that do a good job influencing culture for the better these days are Roman Catholics. I'm not saying I agree with Roman Catholicism, I'm just saying because they've not been alienated from their own institutions the way Protestants have, they do a better job at influencing the culture. But I think Protestants could do a much better job if we just take back the institutions that we started. Okay, what I'm doing here is I picked a lot of flowers in the last episode, so here I'm just going to go plant them. I'm talking about, like, retaking cultural institutions for the kingdom while also planting flowers. That's just the way I roll. Okay, I'm gonna need to make a pickaxe over here. So yeah, the reason I'm not PCA is really not theological. It's more strategic because I think we need to retake the mainline denominations. But at the same time, it's not like the PCA's theology is perfect. Their sacramentology is really troubling at times because like Ligonier Ministries is a good example. On many issues, they're great. I'm not dissing them as a whole, but there are legit criticisms of them because whenever you hear someone from like Ligonier or really anyone, any of the popular like quote unquote reformed pastors, talk about the sacraments, it's basically that they're just symbols. That's all you'll really hear, and maybe there's something more. Maybe they value the sacraments more than your average evangelical Baptist does, but they still don't think the sacraments do anything. It's still basically just a symbol. And John Knox, the founder of Presbyterianism, said, and I'll quote for the 5 millionth time, "We utterly damn the vanity of those that affirm the sacraments to be nothing else but naked and bare signs. Assuredly we believe that by baptism we are engrafted in Christ to be made partakers of his justice, by the which our sins are covered and remitted." You will never hear that from a PCA church, partly because they don't use the Scots Confession, they only use Westminster, and I also think that's a bit of an issue too. The PCA only uses... This is another reason why I'm not PCA. This is the only, like, explicit, like, on-paper theological issue that I have with the PCA. Is, all Reformed churches use confessions. We're confessional. But, not all of them use the same written confessions. So the only confessions that the PCA uses are the Westminster Standards. That means the Westminster Confession and the Westminster Larger and Shorter Catechisms. And I don't disagree with Westminster. I do think on its own it's a bit insufficient, so that's why, on paper, I like the PCUSA's theology better. Problem is it doesn't actually adhere to its own theology that it confesses on paper. But on paper, the confessions of the PCUSA are not just Westminster, they have a bunch of confessions. It's the Westminster Confession, the Scots Confession, the Heidelberg Catechism, the Second Helvetic Confession, the Barmen Declaration, and a few others. So, if it's laid out like that, it really seems more like we're part of the Reformed tradition, and we are historically rooted in the Reformation, because they have documents that actually come directly from the Reformation, like the Scots Confession. Westminster was written like 100 years after. Whereas if you only have one confession, it makes it seem like these are our beliefs and we're almost confessing them in a vacuum. And that's not what they're trying to say, but that's what it can come across as. An example of how this plays out is that the Scots Confession is extremely clear that the sacraments are not just symbols. We believe that we receive the true body and blood of Christ in the Lord's Supper. But Westminster is a bit more vague. I don't disagree with it, but it's written such that a more symbolic interpretation could be taken. I think it's a misinterpretation, but Westminster is not written in a way that excludes a Zwinglian or a Presbyterian, as I'd call it, interpretation of the sacraments. And that's why I think we should use the Westminster Confession, because it's great. I'm not dissing the Westminster Confession, trust me. We just need to use it in conjunction with the Scots Confession. And there's no harm in having a few others as well, like the PCUSA does. But I think there is harm in, like, only using Westminster, because I think it is insufficient on its own. Okay, I'm just about done with the flowers here. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, I think this looks pretty good. I'll just, now I'm gonna maybe, like, plant a tree over here. Maybe I'll have a little pool of water and place, I think, well, yeah, what I'll do is I'll have a pool of water here. I'll put some lily pads and some bigger flowers, and I'll plant a tree in the middle. I think that'll look good. Okay, so that's basically why I'm not PCA. My goal is not for people who are in the PCA to leave it, because it still is a strong fortress for good doctrine. My goal is to retake the PCUSA, and then hopefully the denominations can merge, and I think the problems of both will sort of cancel each other out. For them to merge, the PCUSA obviously has bigger problems that need to be fixed. So I'm not saying they're going to merge anytime soon, but if they do, then I think it'll be good. Then the PCA can finally get some better buildings, and the PCUSA can finally, like, have people who go to heaven, because most of them don't really believe in Christianity at all. But that's why, like I say, if you just evaluate the beliefs of your average PCUSA versus your average PCA person, there's a 99% chance I'll agree with the PCA person more, obviously. But because the PC USA is the original one, that's the one we need to reclaim.